discussed about the box model in CSS, let us now learn how to apply padding, margins, and borders to any HTML element. And let us start learning with iDigital Printer. Now here I have my index.html file open up, and I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to insert some content inside of it. So let me just insert a paragraph with some dummy text inside of it. And inside of my CSS, I will target this div and give it a width of maybe 60 VW and a height of 400 pixels. And I'm going to give a background color of maybe blue violet. And as you can see that this particular div has been created with some text inside of it. And just to make it more clear, I will give it a color of white. We will discuss all of these font CSS properties in the later video. But here you can see that my text is visible and my div has created. Now let us try applying some padding inside of this and see how this affects the HTML element. So to apply padding, you use the padding CSS property, and this is a short form for padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. So essentially the counting which you do, or the sequence in which you write your padding is top, right, bottom, and left. And this is consistent for padding and margins both. So whenever you're doing any value or you're inserting any values with paddings and margins, you need to just make sure that you write the correct sequence. So if you just write padding here and you apply a value, so I'm going to apply a value of, let's say, 1 rem. Now 1 rem, if you haven't defined any absolute value whatsoever, 1 m or 1 rem transforms to roughly 16 pixels, because that is the default font size for the root HTML element. Until and unless you define a specific new font size value for the HTML tag, 1 rem is always equal to 16 pixels, and so is 1 m. So 1 rem transformed to 16 pixels, and now you can see that there is some space between the content and the end of the HTML element, which is my div. And as we discussed in the box model, padding is essentially the space between the content and the border. So as and when I keep on increasing the padding size, the space will be increased with respect to every corner of the content. So this is essentially giving padding across top, right, bottom, and left. Now, for example, if you just want to give some padding to the very top, so instead of this, you can write padding top of 2 rem, and now you can see that only padding top of 2 rem has been applied, and padding of left, right, and bottom is no longer applied. Similarly, if you want to apply padding to all of the 4 sides or any of the 4 sides, you simply write the direction. So padding right will give it a right, padding bottom will give a padding at the bottom of the element, and padding left will give a padding to the left of the element. And there is yet another way of writing padding, and if you want to apply different padding values for all of the 4 different directions, you can use this sequence of top, right, bottom, and left to define different padding values. So let's say I want the top to have a value of 2 rem, the right I want it to have 3 rems, bottom I want to have 5 rems, and left again I want to have 3 rems. So given a space, you have now defined padding values for top, right, bottom, and left. If you go back, now you can see that some amount of padding has been applied to all of the places. And if you want to inspect this, check out the inspect and go in your div. And here you can see that the padding value of 2m, 3 rem, 5 rem, and 3 rem has been applied. And if you want to visualize what this is all about, you can go in the computing, you can go in the computer tab and you can check out this green area which you can see. This is the actual calculation of the padding. So essentially 2 rems transforms to 32 pixels, and as we discussed that 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels. So top padding has been transformed to 32 pixels. Similarly 3 rem transforms to 48 pixels, and similarly 5 rems is 80 pixels, and again 3 rems is 48 pixels. So all of these values are getting converted to pixels, and this is how you write padding for each and every element, for each and every direction of your element. Now let us now apply some margin and see what this is all about. So I am going to add another div here, and this div will have probably some less text inside of it. And now you can see that these two elements are placed, these two divs are placed, but there is no space between them. And as we discussed, that margins are essentially space between two HTML elements, or space around any HTML element. So for this div, I am going to give, or both of the divs, I am going to give a margin, and I'm going to say that the margin needs to be 1 rem. So once I do this, and now you can see that there is some space around each of my divs, which has been defined by 1 rems of margin space. Similar to padding, you can apply different margin spaces like margin top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left, or you can use the shorthand form and define individual values for all of it. So let us say I want the margin top to be 1 rem, and margin left, margin right to be 0, and then margin left to be maybe 6 rems, and margin, or this is the bottom one, so I want it to be 6 rems, and the left one needs to be 4 rems subsequently. Now if I go back, now you can see that some space in the left has been applied, there is some margin at the right, there is some margin at the top of each of my divs, and then each of the divs bottom margin is also defined. There is yet a property called margin collapse, which we will not discuss right now. You can take a look of you can take a look at that in your probably your own research. But what essentially margin collapse means is that if you have two values which are collapsing on top of each other, so you can see that margin bottom of 6 rems and margin top of 1 rem. So essentially this div's margin bottom is 6 rem, and this div's margin top is 1 rem, and both of these margins are collapsing on top of each other. Now essentially if there are two conflicting margin values between two HTML elements, the browser picks up the margin value which is the maximum of them all. That essentially means that it selects 1 rem and 6 rem, and it selects the maximum of them all, and then it defines that value. And you can see that, you can go here and you can see that this div has a value of 6 rem, while this div has a value of 1 rem. Now, this is all about paddings, margins. Now, let us discuss about borders. So, I will delete one of the divs to make it visually simpler. And now I am going to go ahead and add a border. Now, to apply a border, you need to define a couple of values. The first value you define in the border is the thickness of the border, and you define it using any of the CSS measurement units we have studied so far. So you can use pixels, you can use percentages, you can use ems, rems, VH, VW, or any other CSS unit. For border purposes, we usually stick to pixel values because it is the most simplest form of thickness you can define. So I'm going to give it a thickness of 2 pixel. Now, the next value which the border property takes in is the type of border that you want to define. And essentially, the default border type is solid. You can have dashed as well, and you can have dotted as well. So these are the three different types of border styles that you can apply. So let me just first show you the solid border type, and then Finally, you give the color of the border. So you can give it any color you want. So let's say I just give it a color of black. I go back, and now you can see that a thickness of 2 pixels of border has been applied all across my element. I can increase this size to make it more visually visible. And now you can see that a thickness of 10 pixels of solid border has been applied to my HTML element. I can change the color, I can change the border type as well. So let us just make this dashed and see what changes. And now you can see that the border is no longer a solid plain frame, but it is in the form of a dashed frame. And similarly, we have something called dotted. And if you go back, and now you can see that these dots of a border frame has been created with a thickness of 10 pixels. So this is how you apply borders to any of your HTML elements. This kind of brings us to the end of padding, margins, and borders. We will continue our discussion with other CSS properties. Till then, I will see you all in the next video.